and I live in Vermont, so I ski a lot. I actually
Nice.
hiked up the mountain this morning before sunrise and skied down. So
Really?
yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare. Our guest is Dr. Jonathan Mason. He's co-founder and chief clinical officer of Select Dental Management. They started in 2017, and they already have 38 practices with 85 clinicians. And so Dr. Mason, he's been a dentist himself since 2006, had his own practice, and has been working with Select Dental Management since 2017. And so it's a pleasure to have you on the show
Thank
today.
you very much for having me.
All right, so let's dive in. Let's talk about your story a little bit. Obviously you graduated dental school about 15 years ago or so now. And so how did you know you wanted to be a dentist? I mean, I'm always curious to find people's backstories. Like, was that something that your family was into? Did you have a positive experience along the way? What was that
My
like?
dad was a dentist. So which is probably the most common story of people going to dentistry. Yeah, my dad was a dentist. And so I'd always thought I was an economics major in college. And so I was always going to go into, thinking about either finance or dentistry, and went to college during the kind of, the dot-com bubble burst when I was in college, and there was basically no job. So dental school it was for me.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in college, it was like the 08, 09 recession, and everybody was saying, like, "Oh, stay in college. Like, there's no jobs out there." Yeah. So it's funny, different, similar things, just different time frames. So, So like when you were, just because your parents are doing it doesn't necessarily mean you want to do it. So like, what was early childhood life like? Like, did you see his job? Did you see his work schedule? And you felt like that was something that was interesting to you?
Yeah. So basically, and I told that when I applied for dental school, I think I went to dental school for all the wrong reasons, which is basically, my dad was around. My dad was all my sports games. I was an athlete growing up, and he was at every hockey game, every tennis match. He was there. We lived a nice life, had a couple houses, and, nothing. I'm sure there's a lot of stresses in the background, but I didn't see them as a kid. But being able to grow up in that kind of, upper middle class suburban world was really nice. And I thought that it was a great profession. He was his own boss. He made his own hours, took vacation when he wanted to. And he didn't really expose me or push me to go into dentistry. I knew very little about the actual practice of dentistry until I learned it in dental school. So it was more of a lifestyle thing for me. I liked working with my hands. I was always more into the sciences. So those things lended it. But I pretty much knew when I was 11 or 12 that I was going to go into dentistry.
Okay, so 11 or 12. So, and then you said you're into sports. Like, what kind of sports were you into?
So I grew up playing hockey and tennis. I was actually captain of my college squash team. I switched to squash when I was in college. Nice. And then, so a lot of racket sports I still play. I play a lot of golf, and I live in Vermont, so I ski a lot. I actually hiked up the mountain this morning before sunrise and skied down.
Really?
So yeah.
Man, that is a heck of a workout. Do you have like any fitness trackers to tell you like how many calories you burn?
I've always wanted to. I don't have it. It's a lot. It's a great way to start the day, but yeah.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah, I got one of these Bootstraps, and it's cool. Like taking out the guesswork and knowing exactly how hard you work has been sweet. I can't even imagine how many calories you burn like climbing up a mountain. But anyways, like how do you think that like playing sports has translated into like your business career?
Playing sports. Not only was it playing sports. I was part of a team sport, which was important. And also played some individual sports, which kind of puts the onus on myself to perform. But it was like like tennis, it was individual, but you're part of the overall, your score counter for the overall team. So what you're doing, by yourself in that match really mattered to what the overall team was. And so for me, having that responsibility to the other people within my team, and then I was always captains of, whether from high school to college, I was always kind of captains in leadership. And so for me, the sport playing really led to leadership, led to, responsibility, and having other people within the team, trusting me, and relying upon me. And so, not only is that, played itself in business, but it's also being part of a locker room, being part of a team, to be able to get along with everybody is also, part of leadership and part of, maintaining a really balanced team.
Yeah. Well, and then the other part too. So yeah, working with teams, and then there's the work ethic, but there's also like the scheduling part of like the motivation side, right? Like you have to be motivated to get a lot more done than the average person, and you have to be willing to make a lot of sacrifices, and it forces you to set schedules. Like I remember, when I was in high school, like, some days, you're up, you go to school, we got off, I'd go out because I was a wakeboarder, so we'd go out to the lake, I'd coach for 4 hours so I could get a little set in, come back, hit the gym, back home at, 9:30 for dinner, 10 to 11 doing homework, 11:30 I'm asleep, and then up and do it all over again. And it just like forces you to live that kind of lifestyle. So was that your
Yeah,
experience?
it does. So I was always a better student during my sports seasons, which, I had less time, but I was much more scheduled and regimented. And and so for me, like that was one thing when I went to college, I wanted to play sports because I know myself a little bit. I get lost a little bit, having some fun. And so for me, having that regiment, having that schedule, it really made me get my work done, made me get my sports done. And I was always a much better, student during those times. And when I wasn't in sports, you have all day. And so sometimes you never get anything done.
Yeah. That's like that saying, if you want something done, ask a busy person to do it.
So I like that saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, did that translate over into like after you graduated from dental school, like having that schedule, like creating that schedule so you could be more productive?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm not great on my days off getting stuff done. I never seem to, but yeah, during the day, during my office schedule, being able to set the schedule and being able to commit to that, and also getting that time, whether it was 4.5 days a week, I was working, during the day, seeing patients, during, whether I'm answering emails and phone calls, between patients, things like that. Before I started the DSO, it was, just taking care of patients, dealing with referrals, dealing with all the stuff during the day. And when I was off, I was off. That gave me my kind of recharging moment to come back the next week.
So you graduated dental school in 2006. What was your first job? What was
I did a residency until 2007. Okay. So at a VA hospital. And then my first job was going to work for my dad. So I worked in he had a large GP practice, 11 operatories. I think there was 4 doctors. There was 3. I was the 4th general dentist, and we had a 2-day week periodontist. My dad always told me, he said, I'll teach you how to do, the business and the crown and bridge and kind of the restorative stuff. So like, go learn how to do root canals and surgery, basically. I want to keep that stuff in house. So I went to a program that I did a ton of surgery. And then when I went to start working for him and doing general dentistry, I found myself pretty bored, actually. After doing some fillings and crowns for like 6 or 7 months, I was like, I need more. So I actually developed my own business with a doctor out of Dallas, Dr. Dave Roberts out of Dallas. And I started doing, I was anesthesia trained. I was doing a lot of wisdom teeth, and I started doing basically mobile oral surgery for a couple of days a week, where I was going into other general dentist offices and doing wisdom teeth and IV sedation. I did that for about 2 days a week for about 6 years. And so that was keeping me really busy, and that kind of made my plate full, and I didn't have as much downtime. And that was, again, talk about schedule, that was it. I had my Thursdays, my Fridays, I was doing surgery kind of all over the place, traveling between office to office. And that made myself more regimented. I had to do that. I was constantly responding to emails. So I kind of developed that while I was also working for my dad in a larger GP practice.
Oh, cool. So, but you said this was in Dallas.
No. This was in Connecticut. He taught me the system. Cool. He taught me the mobile system. I didn't think of this on my own. I was kind of, as a friend of a friend, and he basically showed me how to do this kind of mobile thing, which is more common in California and Dallas, things like that, than is in the East Coast.
Okay. And then when did you go start your own practice?
So I started 6.5 years ago, after I had a ski house in Vermont, and really loved it. And my family decided that we were going to kind of move to this more rural area. And I called around like a local chamber of commerce, and they introduced me to a dentist. He said, I'm 69. I'm looking to sell my practice. I've had 2 associates in the past 5 years come in to try to buy it, and it hasn't worked out. He's like, I don't want to associate. I want to sell. I'll work for 6 months to 9 months, but I'm ready to retire. He was a great dentist. He was Pankey trained. And I didn't know what to expect. This is a pretty rural area in Vermont, and walked into a beautiful, fully modern, chartless dental practice. So, views of Equinox Mountain, it just right on a pond. It's like a beautiful place to practice, and was totally blown away, and decided to basically get rid of everything in Connecticut, move to Vermont, and buy a dental practice before I worked in it for a day. I knew what I felt like I'd been 8 years out of school. My dad taught me a lot about running a practice. I knew I had increased specialty skills to improve upon the numbers within the practice. And I was younger. I was working faster, going to work harder than he had been and been a successful practice. But I knew that I could really grow and improve that practice once I took it over.
So yeah, it's interesting. Going to these small towns is oftentimes like a deterrent for a lot of people, but it's also can be a blue ocean. So like, what was it? What was that like? Was there a lot of other dentists, or I mean, did you guys have like wide open?
So
fields?
so kind of both, which is there's actually I think 5 or 6 dentists in my town that I work in. A few of them were a little bit older. The town itself is 5,000 people, which is pretty small. We probably pull from a pool about 30,000 in terms of it's pretty geographically wide. There's no specialist. Okay. My closest specialist is about 45 minutes away. And the ones I use are about an hour to an hour 15 away because I use a few that I really have really good relationship that do really good work. So I knew that I'd be able to, I wanted to do more specialty work. I was doing sedation in the wisdom teeth, but once I got here, I started taking implant training, started placing implants, got a cone beam. I was doing some endo, not all of it, but they were doing a lot more specialty work than had been done within the practice. And I knew that there was that need, within town. So it was blue ocean's a good way of putting it. And
yeah, sounds like it.
And I didn't know, again, it was more for lifestyle than money. It was, you don't need to a lot. I mean, we're living here in this rural area. But it turned out to be way, way more successful, than I thought. And I actually wrote an article in Dental Economics probably a year or two ago about rural dentistry. And it's just a fabulous way to practice, especially if you like doing a lot of different procedures. You can't rely on endodontists next door. They're an hour away, and everybody up here is extremely booked. And Vermont has a huge shortage of dentists within the state, and so the demand was huge. And so It worked out to be it was fortuitous. It worked out to be a great situation.
Yeah, that's cool. So, what was it like? Transitioning from essentially you had been an associate before, and now you're the business owner. I mean, what were some things that happened that were unexpected, and what were some things that were just harder than you thought they were going to be?
The hardest thing I found was that my dad had always had an office manager. His philosophy is always, I'm going to pay someone to run this business and do the dentistry. I'm going to be less stressed out. And I came into a situation that wasn't quite like that. We had an office manager, but the previous dentist really did a lot of his own work in running reports, and I had no idea how to do any of that. So that was the most stressful thing for me is, running the AR, running end of the month and closing out and things like that. And so while I think I'm a pretty good dentist and can produce a lot and great with the patients, the business side of things, I didn't have. I was just kind of riding on my skills and my communication skills with patients to get them to accept treatment. But when it comes to looking at the numbers and things like that, I had no idea what I was doing.
Wow. So then what happened? How'd you figure it out? Did you have to hire somebody new?
No, I learned how to run some of the reports. I just kept on doing just kept on doing the dentistry as I wanted to do it. I got my entire team on board with we call like clinical operations, from the experience from the patients, from the first phone call to when they walk in the door to how they're handled with handoffs between the front desk and the assistants, hygiene and myself. We added intraoral cameras to everything. So I never really, in my own practice, I never really looked at the numbers that much. I was still just riding on, what the treatment that the patients needed was, making sure that they were on board with the treatment plan, showing them photos, showing them the x-rays, and truthfully the success from there just followed, which is kind of my philosophy as a clinical dentist. I don't practice to numbers. I just practice to what the patient's needs are. That's good. And success has followed. Elliot, you interviewed my business partner, Elliot Zibel, a few months ago.
Yeah.
And he makes fun of me that I don't know the numbers in the business. So to answer your question, I never really learned it. I just was running a very successful dental practice by doing what was needed for the patients. That's where he came in as the finance person.
That's hilarious. All right. So let's talk about that. So you're running a successful practice in Vermont. Obviously now you've got a very successful DSO with 38 practices, but when did that come about? When did you get the idea for doing that? Was that from meeting Elliot?
So Elliot and I have known each other since kindergarten. So so we go back to when we grew up together. We've got a nice photo of us playing soccer when we were like 6 together.
That's
and
awesome.
so, and no, we were just, I mean, we were still friends, and we were just together one night. My dad sold his dental practice in Connecticut before we started Select to a larger, DSO. And I also have a friend that started a DSO in the state of Rhode Island. And so all of a sudden it kept on popping up in my map about, DSOs and what was going on. I didn't know much about the industry at all, but I was, not sure where I wanted to go, but kind of still wanted something more. And so Elliot asked me one night, we were just hanging out, and he said, "How's business?" And it was great. I mean, I think at the time I'd been there, my practice 2.5 years or something like that, and grown from 850 in revenue to about 1.5, and things were going really well. I was by myself. Things were going really well.
So you feel like, yeah, you're keeping most of that.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And I said, this is what I've been doing. It's been going great. He didn't know anything about dentistry, what was going on. I knew that he was looking to do something else and get out of the industry that he was in. And so I was telling him about, what I bought my practice for, what the revenue was, and things like that. And we kind of decided to, and I also told him what was kind of going on in dentistry with DSOs, although I didn't know a lot about it, but I knew, that it was kind of a growing field. I honestly kind of thought it was kind of late to the game. I was totally wrong, but it was totally wrong. So it was good. Turned out we're kind of right in the middle of things. But and for me, I told him so we ended up saying, well, let's go to, so this was like in September, like call it Labor Day weekend. And a few weeks later, we went down to the ADSO conference. It was in Washington, D.C. that year, to learn about the industry. And that was kind of where things got kicked off. That was where we learned a lot about what was going on. I didn't know any of it. He didn't know too much. And he kind of, from there, he deep dove into the dental industry, for a few months to figure out, to learn more about the industry before we started, forming the business and acquiring practices.
Yeah, because with the DSO, like you need one doctor, you need somebody who's an actual dentist, yes, right, to be on the board, or
we need the dentist to be the owner of the clinical piece of the clinical entity as well. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And
so was your practice the first one,
no,
or did you so that's just you? That's not part of it.
It is now, but it wasn't for a long time.
Okay.
So it was viewed we viewed it was an entrepreneurial business. It was a risk, and I did not fold my practice in for about 2 years after we formed Select. It now is, but it was, that paid I have kids, that raised my family. That income from my practice was everything. That's all I had. And so I was not willing to roll that into a company that I didn't know how I was going to do. Once I felt we really had our solid feet on the ground, it was actually right before COVID. We were supposed to close, and then we delayed it till about end of July. During COVID, I ended up selling in. Once I thought that Select was really, really, it was a great business. We were doing well. We were getting traction. We were growing. Then I did fold my practice in, and it was very, very helpful. And we can go back to earlier, but it was very helpful that I folded my practice in, because I learned a lot about the operations of Select, which I wasn't seeing as much on a day-to-day basis. And I think that really helped me a lot as a chief clinical officer.
Okay. So yeah, what was it like? How did you guys go about doing your first acquisition?
So, well, first of all, when we started forming, I was interested in doing things the way I knew how to do it, which was kind of PPO, fee-for-service kind of practices. I have a full fee-for-service practice in Vermont. I don't do any insurances there, but I did in Connecticut. But it was really looking to practice with similar practices. I'd proven that it could grow just based on, optimizing clinical operations within the practice and maybe adding some procedures. But really, when Elliot and I looked at the numbers in my practice, 80% of the growth was just basically better communication with patients and better treatment planning and better kind of, treatment plan acceptance. About 20% of it was added procedures, implants, endo, things like that. So really most of the growth that we knew we wanted to come from in the practices was just from kind of optimizing what they were already doing. And working with the teams to kind of improve their kind of treatment planning and patient communication skills. So we looked at the first practice. We wanted to be close to me. And Saratoga Springs, New York is a great town. It's a growing place. And so we were looking for a practice in that area. It's about an hour from me. It was a place where I could get to if I needed to. And so we ended up buying our first practice in Saratoga Springs, New York.
Okay. So is there any sort of rules of thumbs that you looked at? Like sometimes, in real estate, you would say, look at 100 in residential real estate, look at 100 houses, make offers on 10. So that way you can buy one. Is there anything like that you guys were using as a rule of thumb?
We had no idea what we were doing.
So how did it even pop up on your radar?
I don't know how Elliot found it somehow. I don't know how he found it through a broker. I don't know how he found that particular practice. I mean, that doctor was looking to retire. We don't do those kind of deals anymore. So we were buying
because you had to hire new associates right away, right?
And we hired our first one, and that did not work out. And so we so within the first couple months, the first couple of weeks, we had to fire that associate. We were learning a lot as we were going.
Who was practicing then? Who was doing
the previous dentist was still there.
Okay, so he had an agreement with him to go to get the full payout. He stood on
6 months, something like that. Exactly.
We had like 6 months to figure this out.
Figure out. Had a dentist to go day one, brought her in, didn't work out, fired her, and then found another dentist, brought him in, and then the other dentist, kind of transitioned out. So that was a big learning experience. I think Elliot would probably say we've probably done everything wrong at the beginning of starting our company. We didn't, we didn't know.
You have to. I mean, no, you have to. There's no amount of business books that you can read that can make you fully prepared to actually run a business. It can help, but you got to get it. You got to get your hands dirty. So no, I get that. So what was your biggest lesson learned then? Like, it sounds like maybe it was when you buy a practice, make sure the doctor is staying on for at least a couple of years.
Yes, you're not the organization to transition out a doctor right away. 100%.
Okay.
That was for me on the clinical side. I'm sure Elliot had a lot of business stuff that he learned, but for me on the clinical side, that was the number one thing. Is we're not set up like that. We're too spread out. We're kind of we're in a lot of states. That is not our model. Our model is that we want dentists that want to stay for 2 to 3 years. Give us some time to transition. Give us some time to get the whole team on board with things that we're trying to do. Those things take a lot longer than I had ever expected.
And so, was there a real estate component to this one as well?
There was not. There was not. We were just this one was the first practice. He did not own. There's a landlord. He was renting, so there's no real estate.
Okay, so you had to sign a lease. You just transferred the lease over to your name. Did the lease terms change at all on you guys, or no?
I don't know. At the very beginning, I don't know if the lease terms changed or not. Again, I kind of stay a little bit out of that realm of the deals.
So when you are taking this over, like, did you have a kind of operations manual or a list of procedures, like tentatively that you were going to use, or did you start creating it on this one, or was that something later that happened?
It's something later that happened. We were taking over and just trying. I mean, it was just kind of a restorative practice, and that's what we were gonna stick to. We did hire a few. We had a few hires. 3 people that had been working for an oral surgeon office that left, and so we did have some people with some kind of clinical dental background and some operational stuff that we had hired right when we were buying this practice. Those were our first employees, who are still 2 of them are still with us today.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. All right. So how long did it take you guys to get ready for your second acquisition?
Probably pretty quick. I think we acquired 4 practices within that first year.
Wow. Okay. So did you guys, were you bootstrapping this? Had you talked with the bank that had approved this? How are you financing?
So the first thing we did was we raised money from friends and family when we started the organization. Okay. And part of the thing when Elliot and I started the company was, when I bought my practice, right, I think I did like 110% financing from Bank of America with no money down, which was great. And we kind of thought we could do that. And it turns out we were totally, totally wrong. That was one of the most major surprises that we came across. So, so I think we bootstrapped the first one, and then we started getting involved with banks.
Is that because banks are okay doing that for one, but they view it as riskier and riskier as you acquire more and more?
That's certainly what I think. And there are a lot of and I think a lot of the banks were, and again, I'm not practicing. I only see patients in my office in Vermont, right? So I might be the owner, I might be the chief clinical officer, but I'm not the one seeing the patients in the office. And a lot of the DSO space is really popular, and a lot of the biggest banks out there for lending are Bank of America, TD Bank, Citibank was getting into they wanted in the DSO world specifically, and we went with them, but it was very difficult. We just had a hard time getting the money, going through the amount of red tape we had to go through in order to get the money for the acquisitions was just a lot, and it was taking up all of our time. It was just a crazy amount of time. Just trying to get the money. I just think that they were uncomfortable with the space, with the multi-practice DSO space. The banks were less comfortable. Maybe they are more today, but we also have personal guarantees. When we were dealing with the banks, Elliot and myself were personal guaranteed on it, which was pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah. So he's essentially finding these. You guys are kind of raising the money together. But your main job is chief clinical officer. And so, you've got 4 practices now. I mean, what's your roles and responsibilities at this stage? What do you do? At
that stage, pretty early on, I probably wasn't doing a whole lot. Nice. So my roles evolved a lot as we've grown. We didn't have formularies. We weren't, that well organized of an individual, of a whole organization. So really my role was really kind of doctor contact, was maintaining those relations with doctors. For one of the second or third practice we partnered with, we had to bring an associate in. So I helped to hire him. He's still with the company, and he was a really big asset because he came into a practice and we were able to grow that practice a lot. And then we kind of brought him in to kind of be like my, left hand, kind of not, so I guess kind of my equal as we continue to grow things. There's only so much time that I had to give to, that can be at these practices. And so he was able to travel to practices as well, because we kind of thought along the exact same lines clinically. So that was a really big help early on, was bringing him on. That helped with your, someone that I trust, someone that I thought similar, someone that can give FaceTime to a couple practices that were closer to where he lived, and I can give kind of FaceTime to the practices by where I lived. And then, so my role was really, being there for the doctors, and then also kind of to help, audit charts, being helping the team with kind of achieving that clinical optimization.
So you mentioned the first one you had no idea what you're doing. Now you've got 38 practices, and then when you had 4, you were stressed out about doing your personal guarantee. So you still had a high level or at least somewhat of a level of insecurity, right? So at what stage did you feel like, okay, now I'm kind of starting to get the hang of this and I have some confidence in this?
Probably, and a lot of people say it's somewhere in that 5 to 7 range. Once we were able to we went to private money pretty early on, and we weren't bought out, but we went to a kind of a healthcare investor pretty early on, probably around the stage of 5 practices. I don't know the exact date. A great partner. And once we were able to have that and have the kind of real cash flow to be able to acquire the type of practice that we wanted to, and we were able to grow. Elliot, I would say at the time, I kind of probably disagreed with most of this, but he really was hiring more corporate people to help run things, and that's been really, really helpful. And someone described it as kind of a staircase. You overgrow corporate, and then you acquire to kind of meet it, and then you acquire another practice, and you're too thin corporate. Then you have to grow corporate again, and you overgrow corporate, and then you acquire practices to grow into that. And we've been constantly doing that. And I think that was a really big, having that kind of, that corporate structure, has been really, really helpful. We have a very large corporate structure right now. But I believe the first practice was at some point in time, I forget what year it was, but it may have been in 2019. It may have been in 2019. It may have been in early 2020. We hired a CFO. And so, because Elliot was acting as our CEO of our company, because I'm still practicing chairside. But we hired the CFO to take the financial aspect off of him and get that really running well. That took a lot of stress off me, took a lot of stress off Elliot. He could do more business development and more run the company. And then we were able to really kind of start maximizing what we were doing.
Yeah, that's cool. So what's a common belief in your industry that you disagree with?
The most common belief is that partnering with an organization like us is a bad thing. I think that when we started our company, we really wanted to, only because I didn't know anything about, people call it corporate dentistry. I don't really know what that means. I've worked for my dad, I've worked for myself. I don't really understand that term, but it has a negative connotation, as most of us know. And so, during COVID, we have two dentists that are on the clinical, like part of our leadership team, and we were on Zoom calls for 2 months. We made our own extraoral suctions. We got foggers. We got our N95s. We got everybody fit tested. And we were really able to practice up to the standard of care and keep track with all of the changing regulations in the industry, much more so than individual practices. And I think that in terms of regulation and standards, we've acquired practices, and once you start looking under the hoods post acquisition, we're finding that a lot of them aren't doing things the way they should be. They're kind of sliding by, kind of undetected. So I think partnering with a corporation like us really gets you to that, up to that standard of care in all things, and especially with compliance. There's a lot of camaraderie. It can be hard practicing as a dentist by yourself in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of lonely. We've got 85 clinicians. We have continuing education every month. There's a great network of dentists to be a part of. And I think that a lot of dentists are kind of seeing this happen. But I think COVID for the DSO world was, I don't think that our situation was unique. I think that a lot of dentists saw how well a lot of companies were doing coming out of it, and the preparations that they were making, that it was kind of nice to be part of a larger group.
Yeah, and I think, when you say corporate dentistry, that really got started, I want to say in the 90s. Like, before that, it was just everybody was an individual mom and pop operator, and then they started these groups, and they had a different name for it. I forget what it was. It wasn't DSO. I don't even think it was DPO, but it was like a group that went out and was like acquiring a bunch of practices, and they did things like really the wrong way, and then they went public, they went bankrupt, and I think that gave a corporate dentistry like a really negative connotation. And so people have been working to overcome that for a long time since then. But now, like you said, it is like they've removed a lot of those negative elements of group models or corporate dentistry, because you can get autonomy as a clinician. You can get, have the freedom to practice the way you want. Not only that, but like the whole reason there was a need for them in the first place was because most dentists don't like wearing all the hats like of a business owner. They don't like running payroll and being the HR guy and hiring new staff and running the procedures and doing the accounting, right? It's like they want to be able to practice and collect a check and leave. And so I think I think it's getting a lot. There's both, and you can still, even with all that, you can still maintain ownership. You don't have to sell 100% to the DSO. You can maintain equity in your practice. So yeah, I think all those things have been like really, really positive.
And all of our practices do. We don't buy 100. We did in the very beginning buy 100%, but we don't buy 100% of practices. Our dentists, they're partners. We're a partnership model. They're maintaining equity. We're helping them to grow. They're going to stay on 2 to 5 years and some more. Post-COVID, COVID was tough for a lot of single dentists. There's a lot of work to be done. And, we're partnering with a lot of dentists that are 50 years old. They've got huge practices, and they've, for multiple reasons. One, they want to get out of the running of the business. They want to do the dentistry for the next 10 years. So, some of them want to grow, and they've kind of tapped out what they can do. They need additions, and they want to be part of this kind of network. And so, I was always surprised a little bit at the age of the dentists that we've partnered with have been dropping steadily. Like I said, multiple dentists in their early 50s that we've been partnering with right now, which I never thought going into the business. I figured we'd be buying people in their mid 60s for a couple of years out. That was kind of the initial model. So we've transitioned our thought process multiple times over the course of our company as to what we're trying to do, and change our identity a little bit to meet the demand in the market.
Yeah, that's cool. So, like you said, a lot of companies and DSOs have done really well, even in the face of COVID. However, not all of them. Like, some have definitely failed. What is it that you think that you guys do really well that's allowed you to like grow and continue to grow?
One, I think that we're a very heavily doctor-led organization. So, like I said, there's 3 of us on the leadership team. So we're really doing stuff with clinical things in mind. Rather than that, I think that
rather than being like too much about the numbers, you mean?
Yeah. When we go talk to I talk to every dentist that's selling the company. We're really in the very beginning. I don't do it as much anymore because we've acquired so many. But Elliot and I would go to the meetings. But when we first met a dentist, and my first question was, how many other companies had a dentist come sit with you? And the answer was none. I knew the answer. The answer was none. Nobody brought dentists. So how can you be a dental organization and not bring a dentist to your first meeting?
Oh, yeah,
right?
that's
It didn't
cool.
make any sense. So we're not all about, I mean, Elliot looks at the numbers, but we're not as much about the numbers. We're really about the patient care. We're really, and having the dentist on, 3 dentists on a leadership team, I think really kind of proves that, and we've been able to stick by that as we've continued to grow. We are a partnership network, as you mentioned before. Talk about dentists not selling 100%, so they're maintaining equity. We're partnering with them. We don't just come in and we don't have a cookie cutter way. We treat each individual practice like a patient. Each practice has its own treatment plan. Sure, we have some standard care things and KPIs we look at, but each practice, every dentist has a different skill set. Every practice does things differently. We're looking at a practice right now. They do a ton of IV sedation. Their whole thing is that they do everything under IV sedation. It's a different model than a practice that does no IV sedation, no specialty care within it. So there's a lot of different models out there, and we don't come in with one single kind of playbook. Say this is how we do things at Select. We're going to individually tailor things to each practice. The dentists maintain their clinical autonomy. They can do what they want. Sure, we've negotiated prices with labs and certain goods. Like for our formulary, we have our composites and different things on our formulary that we've negotiated prices with. We ask our doctors to try them, but if they really don't like what's on there, and we partner with great companies like 3M and Dentsply, and most of them are using those kind of products anyways. But for us, it's not you have to use what's on our formulary. It's please try it, and if you don't like it, you can go back to what you're using. But these are prices we've negotiating, and so that kind of autonomy. We don't change the practice management system. We use a third-party overlay to pull the data out. But a lot of practices are really married to the practice management systems that they're using.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm a Dentrix user. If I lost my Dentrix, I'd be blind. So there's a lot of benefits. That's what's worked for us in the acquisitions.
Yeah, that's cool. And I know too, remember when I was talking to Elliot, he was saying the employee churn was just crazy. And that was, you kind of hit a bottleneck somewhere along the way, but it was just, you had to realize the value of culture, the value of the doctor retention. And it sounds like you guys have done a really good job, which is meeting your employees and your doctors and your partners where they're at, and really being intentional about helping it be an easy transition for them and helping it work.
Yeah,
for them.
the hardest thing too, the number one thing, when we looked at the business, Elliot says the number one thing was doctor turnover. What led to a failing DSO was doctor turnover. And so we're really trying to minimize that. And we've kind of tailored, and we started this way from the very, very beginning. I think it was my thought process in terms of what I would want somebody who's buying my practice. I don't want somebody looking over my shoulder. I want to be able to do things the way I want to do it clinically. And I had a very successful practice doing that. Why couldn't we just have a lot of them like that? And as we've grown, we've had to standardize a few more, certainly get a little bit more standardized than we were in the very beginning. But for the most part, a lot of the stuff still rings true, especially on the clinical side of things.
I'm just curious, what was the worst acquisition that you did? It was either the most painful or the most stressful.
It's attitudes of the doctors. That's it. Do
you have a story about any one of those? We've had.
I don't want to. Yeah, we've had 2 really bad acquisitions. We've had doctors that are not team players. We've had doctors that we felt were very dishonest. We didn't know it going into it. We were sold a book of goods that weren't there. And when we get into that, we were very uncomfortable with what they're doing. And they're not. So for us, I think we talked earlier saying, what kind of practice do you look at? It's kind of the personalities of the doctors that are the most important thing. And these 2, it's the same thing. It's kind of I'm losing the word, and not egotistical or self-centered kind of people that are not team players. They're not collaborative. They're not team players. They're not kind of willing to come along with the things that we think are the best practices. And it hasn't gone well.
What happened? You were interviewing with these doctors, and they were leading you to believe that it was a certain way.
Yeah. It was a certain way, and they were a certain way. They're willing to do this. No problem. I want to help you guys out, and whatever. To help develop programs for you guys and these kind of things. And then, without it, once we got into it, it turns out we were really questioning some billing practices they were doing. Everything, all the numbers seemed a little out of whack, and you get under the hood, and they weren't. one office, they weren't doing sterilization right. We had to come in and change everything. It's kind of being sold a book of goods. One of them was really, really early on. And I don't think we had the best integration. Right now we have 3 integrations people. We have a kind of a really robust integrations process, but these are the stuff you learn early on. They were just the wrong partners for us. They were the wrong personalities. They should never have been part of a larger group because they were too full of themselves and not willing to go.
How do you screen for that? Like, what did you learn from that, and how do you apply that?
One, we're doing a much better job integrations and looking at the numbers and finding out exactly what is being done. We try to get into the offices earlier than we've ever have. We try to get clinical involved with them earlier than we ever have in terms of looking at charts and looking at things like that. It's still a struggle. Some doctors don't want us in their office before close. That's a big thing. And so we've that's like,
is that a red flag?
Right now it is more of a red flag. Traditionally, there's a thought process out there. A lot of doctors won't spring that they're selling their practice. We come after hours after everybody's left to meet with them. They don't spring it till about 2 weeks before they're selling on their entire staff. And that's still done pretty regularly. I will say that in my practice, when I bought mine, the whole staff knew he was looking to retire, he was looking to sell. And it was a great transition because everyone was on board. So the doctors that are a little more open about it tends to go much better.
Okay. So what's on the horizon for you guys? You've obviously been growing really fast up until this point. But like you said, we're just right in the middle of it. I mean, there's a whole lot of room left for growth in the DSO space. So what are you guys looking at what's your 1 year and 5 year? We
are still continuing to grow right now. I don't think that we have a slowdown. I think that our partnership model has worked. It's rung true, and we don't even look for Elliot's a business development person right now, and he doesn't go out and do anything. I mean, it just comes to us, and it's wonderful. It's referrals from brokers who we've closed on deals with. It's referrals from friends of practice owners that we've partnered with, which is a great way of doing things. So for us, it's just continuing to grow. Obviously, as we acquire more practices, whether we need more capital partners in order to, we're acquiring larger acquisitions than we ever did. The space, as more and more companies like ours are kind of, growing, there's more competition and the prices of these practices are certainly going up. So whether or not we need to acquire a new capital partner in the near future, we're not really sure. But just continue to grow. I think Ellie and I both really enjoy it. We both enjoy growing the corporate structure, enjoy partnering with the dentist. On my end, we're really looking to kind of scale the clinical organization. I brought on about 7 of our dentists that we partner with to kind of create like a clinical leadership team, because now that we're 85 clinicians, I can't text with 85 doctors all day, every day.
Right.
And so, I'm really kind of bringing people on board to kind of help train them and help me. If a practice in their area needs an associate or anything like that, they're going to help kind of bring that on board to take that stuff off my plate. But for us, it's really just continuing to scale and continuing to grow.
And I hate asking about like the number of locations, because number of locations is just one metric. I mean, there's size of locations, there's that structure, there's so many different ways to measure it. But like, at the end of the day, it's at least a common measurement stick. So do you have an idea of like how big you want to get to in terms of number of locations?
No, I don't think so. We try to acquire 2 a month. That's kind of our thing. So you can kind of put a number.
You might get 25 next year.
So about 25 next year. So that's our number.
That's awesome.
When we sat down and we came up with our goals, our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan, we meet once yearly for 2 days to kind of look at our annual goals. And, every year we sit down, we kind of blow those out of the water for what we're doing.
Wow.
Which is good, but when it comes to, we're gonna slow down. We might not do 25 next year. We think we're gonna slow down a hair.
Okay.
This Omicron thing's got us a little not scared, but we're in popular areas where Omicron's really spreading like wildfire right now. So in the next 2 months,
I heard that it was super mild though. I mean, isn't it like just like the common cold?
It's not. It's super mild, but patients are canceling. Staff members are having to be out if they get it. And so it's just the running the business the next couple months. We're probably going to just slow down or maybe push things out just a couple months, just to kind of make sure that everything's settled down before kind of ramping back up all the acquisitions that we have on our plate.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic for a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But okay, have you thought about ever doing any de novos? Or are you going to stick to acquisition?
We do not know de novos, and so right now we're purely acquisition. I have no plans for de novos unless we partner with somebody that's like big into it. But what we found out through people we talked to, and we're part of the DEO that I know I saw you at down in Florida, it is a different mindset. It's a different skill set. We don't have those skills right now. We're very good at acquisitions. I have no idea how to do a de novo. And so right now I don't see us doing any de novos.
Okay. Well, that's cool. So anybody who wants to reach out, get in touch, find out more about what you're doing, what's a good way for that?
The best way, my email, we have a website, which is probably selectdentalmanagement.com. My email is jmason@selectdentalmanagement.com. Anybody can email me and reach out. It's the best way.
Great. Well, I will write that down in the show notes for everybody who's listening in case they want to reach out and get in touch. So, yeah, awesome, man. Well, hey, I know it's Christmas Eve. This will be well past Christmas Eve by the time this goes live. But thanks for hopping on. Everybody listening, this man hopped on Christmas Eve, the day before big holidays. So definitely appreciate that.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was great. I really appreciate you getting on as well.